Chief Warrant Officer Rob Buss, United States Army, Vietnam. Rob's one of my few Chinook helicopter pilots. He flew CH-47s in Vietnam, and he flew there a whole tour, 365 days, flew almost every other day, he said. He was assigned to the 132nd Assault Support Helicopter Company, Hercules, in Chu Lai, which is an I Corps, and he also was involved in Laos, in the insurgent into Laos with the Lam Song 719 operation, which lasted 45 days, folks. Very, very costly operation for American troops. They were supporting the ARBANs, the ground troops, and they lost 106 helicopters, 600 damaged, and 75 crew and pilots were killed and hundreds injured during that operation. So really amazing. Rob served in the military from 68 to 72, was in Vietnam 70, 71. He did fly with the Americal division over there, so just a great story. I'm just so happy that I interviewed Rob. It was April 16th of this year, one of my most recent interviews in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I'm just so honored to have recorded his story. It's such a part of history, folks, and you'll see as you watch this. His grandfather was in the Prussian army. His father served in World War II as a soldier, was also stationed in Korea, Europe, and Vietnam as an officer and as a chaplain. He was in the office of a chaplain when he was in Vietnam the same time Rob was there, so pretty cool. He'll mention that and talk about that in this interview too. So, but I thank Rob for his service to our country. A very humble, mild-mannered man, and Rob, I really enjoyed visiting with you, so I hope I do you good with this interview. Okay, folks, I want to thank Michael and Darlene Sarofsky and Trish Kerr Hansen for sponsoring Rob's story, making it possible for me to go to Arizona in April. You guys, thank you again. This is a great story, and I hope you take some ownership in this. I appreciate all of you, and thank you for your dedication to our veterans and to our country, and the freedoms that we have are because of these veterans. So you're helping to make this possible. Thank you, and God bless you. Okay, folks, I'm going to Nashville hopefully in August. It looks like it's going to happen. I'm raising some funds to do that, and I want to go there and tell my story. I've been sharing that a little bit of how I've told all these stories for 21 years. If you want to support and donate towards that project, there's information in the video description, in the comment section, and on my website, larrycappetto.com. It would be greatly appreciated. Those of you who've been wanting to help, this would be a great opportunity. I'm going to be able to sit down in a professional studio, television studio in Nashville, with somebody interviewing me for 2 days. We're going to tell my story. It's called Capturing Courage on Camera. I'm very excited about it, and it's going to be a great, great project, and I know you're going to love it. I can't wait to share my story. So, okay, folks, thank you for watching, listening, sharing these stories, subscribing to this channel. It's awesome. Voices of History Radio is still going. Hope it keeps going. I wanted to keep going. I want to get it into the hands of our younger generation and those that commute, anybody at home. I listen to it all the time, so there's really a whole group of people that can listen to the radio station, and I hope you have taken time to listen to it. KVOH, Voices of History Radio. Okay. Thank you. God bless you, and let's just honor Rob now and watch his story, his interview. God bless you. You're going to like the interview. There's no trick questions.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is going to be great, and I'm just setting up my cameras. But it's kind of I'm on a sentimental journey. I started, like I said, here 21 years ago. So
Yeah.
driving down from Colorado yesterday was a trip.
Well,
It took me almost 10 hours to get here. So
yeah. We have friends that go to Pagosa Springs, and basically they're up there for the summer and down here for the winter, you know. So
if I look over here, because I'm running 2 cameras today, don't let that throw you, because your main focus will be on me right here.
Yeah.
So this is recording you, and I'm starting to do 2 camera interviews where I have a second camera, and sometimes just the interaction with me and the veterans. It's gonna
probably to get different clips to make it interesting.
Yeah.
And actually, I think I have seen one of yours. I think the fellow flew, basically he flew OH-6s, and they were, a lot of them died.
Okay, man. First question's the tough one. How old are you today?
Aha, I am 74.
Do you ever think you'd be 74?
I've never really thought that much about my birthdays. It's just, here I am.
You know, the World War II, okay, the Vietnam veterans today are almost the same age as the World War II veterans are when I started my work 21 years ago down here. And they were, the youngest World War II veteran I found back then was like 77, 78. And I've interviewed Vietnam veterans who are now in their late 70s, early 80s. And I've even lost a lot of my Vietnam vets, so.
My dad was World War II, and he was also Vietnam. I think I mentioned that in my email. So, but he passed away at 91, 10 years ago. So
yeah, I saw that your dad and even your grandfather, Prussian Army?
Yes.
And your brother was in the Air Force?
Navy.
A fighter pilot?
Navy, actually attack. It was more bombing.
Okay, okay. So tell me, high school, what year did you graduate from high school?
Well, graduated in 1968. I believe, maybe I've mentioned this, but my dad was career Army officer. We moved every 2 to 3 years. In 1968, we were in Germany, and so I was at a dependent school there. And it was in Germany when I graduated from high school, so 1968. What we have a hard time grasping, and I think I say we meaning people, is that in 1968 there was nothing. No cell phone, certainly no internet. And being in Germany, we had a television, but it wasn't like we got the news, for example, in Tet of 68. People would have seen everything. I just didn't really know that much about Vietnam, frankly.
So when you were in high school, though, was it like this cloud over your head? You knew you were gonna, because you enlisted, right?
I did.
Okay. Why did you enlist? Did you feel a duty to serve your country like your father and your grandfather?
Not really. It was more the air I breathed. And I wasn't going to college. That wasn't even on my mind. It was in Germany, so there wasn't this cadre of fellow high schoolers, 17, 18-year-olds that are, well, where are you going to go next? And that sort of thing. It was more, girls, sports, and in Germany, frankly, drinking. So I didn't think about the military. Graduated in May of 68, and I think my mom and dad, obviously very observant. My dad had served. I mean, it's amazing how old they are. As you get older, you go, wow, they were really smart. So they could see I wasn't moving. You know, May comes and then June, and what's our son gonna do? The other son, my brother, older brother, was already in Navy ROTC in UCLA. But I had no ambitions, apparently, and my dad talked about the military. And of course, that was the air I breathed. I mean, of course, the military. So I joined.
And you joined the Army?
I did.
Where your basic training?
Well, I did go to basic training, of course. So being in Germany, the preferred, I guess, for the Eastern Seaboard and people overseas was Fort Dix, New Jersey. So I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey in the winter. It was cold. So I had joined, in case you're anticipating why did I join and what did I join for, my MOS, I had seen an article in National Geographic when I was in high school that showed helicopter rescue of downed pilots, primarily in North Vietnam, right across the DMZ. And I thought, I would love to be part of that. But I could never see myself being a helicopter pilot. But if I could be a crew chief. So I thought I was signing up to be a crew chief. So when I joined, I thought I was going to be a crew chief. And I only say that because after basic, we're comparing MOSs, 68 Bravo 20. Oh, that's not a crew chief, Rob. What the heck is it? Turbine engine repair. So I would be in an aviation unit repairing the turbine engines, which are fantastic engines, but it's not what I wanted. I wanted to be a crew chief. So it was disappointing. So I went from Fort Dix to Fort Eustis, Virginia, again on the eastern seaboard there. And when I got there, and just, it was going to be 6 or 8 weeks, I forgot how much, of training. I was good at it, but early on they said, remember this is 68, starting to be in 69, they said, we need helicopter pilots. And here's a test, you can take the test. So I said, sure, I'll take the test. Took the test, passed. So when I finished my turbine engine repair, they said, you're going to go to flight school. I said, okay, I'll go to flight school. So I went from there to Fort Mineral Wells, Mineral Wells. Anyway, it doesn't matter the name. I think it was just Mineral Wells for primary helicopter school. And when I got there, there were 500 of us all lined up in platoons, etc. And the commanding officer says, I want 80 of you to drop out now. There's too many of you. And I thought, I'm the youngest of 3, and my dad was an officer in the military. And I thought, I gotta, this impulse to obey, right? But then I thought, wait a minute. They want us to succeed. Somebody is going to make it through. If they can do it, I can do it. So I stuck it out, made it. And at the end, I was in actually the top 25%. Turns out I had a knack for it. And they said, you can go to gunships, medevac, or Chinooks. And I thought, medevac, those guys are getting killed. Gunships, I really don't see a civilian equivalent. Because I'm thinking, I got to go through and then I'm going to get out.
Yeah.
So I took Chinooks, and so that's what I flew in Vietnam.
You were a warrant officer?
I was a warrant officer, yes.
Just tell me a little bit about the CH-47 that you flew. I've done a lot of, my first film on Vietnam focused on the Air Mobile Division with the Huey helicopters.
Oh yeah.
So most of my warrant officers, crew chiefs, door gunners, pretty much the Army was involved with the Hueys, the LZs, all that. So give me a brief synopsis of the Chinook and what it was used for.
Yeah, great question. There was, well, first of all, I came in country in April of 1970. And interestingly enough, my dad met me there because he was already assigned down by Saigon in Mito. And he was, I don't think I mentioned this, but he was a chaplain in the Army.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I mentioned it to this.
No, but I think it was great that he was. Go ahead.
Yeah, anyway, so he met me there and then got an assignment to go to I-Corps, which is really, as I found out later and looked at it since I've read since then, it's where most of the fighting was still going on, even though we were ramping down, Nixon, so they said. And anyway, so a Chinook, a typical assignment for us was troop movement, although not so much troop movement as in combat assaults. It was mostly to take them maybe to their LZ or firebase. A lot of resupply, so there's these connexes filled with whatever, and it didn't matter to me what it was filled with, just let me hook it up, I'll deliver it and put it down and I'll leave. Fair amount of aircraft recovery. So there were a lot of Hueys that got shot down, and my Huey brethren, I've certainly read enough about them. Glad I wasn't a lift pilot. as it turns out. So aircraft recovery, there was civilian transport where we would take Vietnamese or sometimes ARVN troops. Then there was kind of the oddity things that we would do occasionally. I remember a Caribou had crashed on takeoff and they had to take the wings apart and we were assigned to take the wings. So I got one of the wings and one of my other fellow pilots and his Chinook got another wing, and then a CH-54 took the main body out. So we do that type of assignment. Weather was really challenging with the monsoons. So we did mostly VFR flying, which would be visual flight rules. We were instrument rated, but it was more tactical, meaning we knew enough about our instruments to use them for attitude, altitude, and then direction for radio, but they weren't sophisticated. And so, yeah, that's kind of what we did on a routine basis.
And again, the crew. Tell me about the crew on the Chinook.
Sure, thank you. So it was a 4-person crew generally. So there would be the pilot, Peter Pilot, and then there would be the AC, aircraft commander. And the reason I'm showing you here and here is that if you're facing the front, the pilot's on the right side, the aircraft commander's on the left. Then there's the crew chief, which is what I mentioned before I kind of wanted to be, and turned out to be a pilot. And then there's a gunner. So we had 2 M60s. Very rarely did we have what was called a stinger, which would be an M60 on the ramp. So we could have 5, but generally it was a crew of 4.
Now, with the Hueys, Rob, you know, I would talk about going into a hot LZs. Did you ever have to go into a hot LZ, or was it just mainly recovery, transportation, or were there situations where you were part of a combat assault?
There was one time, and the reason it was one time is I think they were phasing out using Chinooks for combat assaults because, so about a month in country, or so, maybe 5 weeks or so in country. It was an ARVN operation. We loaded up, I think 75 ARVNs, more or less, and we were ready to go. This was the pickup zone. So we were gonna pick up and then take them actually. And I heard some popping over off on the right and kind of looking at the ARVN on the ground just to see, are they running for cover? Are they firing back? And I said, maybe they were just shooting. Sure enough, when we take off, you know, the popping began to go and going through the aircraft under my seat up above. And so I thought, so, you know, you're taking fire right, go left. And so we're pulling out. And then the crew chief says, put it down, put it down. So because he had pulled the panel down and our transmission had been shot. And so it was just, oil was leaking and you lose your transmission, you're dead, pretty much. So that was the only time that I had people on board, and that was actually the only time I was shot down, which was enough.
So you were shot down?
Yes. I mean, it was a controlled landing, but I wouldn't have landed had they not shot me down. Now
you're the commander of the aircraft, correct?
No, I was the pilot. There was the aircraft commander because I was only in country about 5 weeks. We had a standard in our company that you needed to fly about 300 hours at least, and then about 3 months in the AO, the area of operation. So I was with the 132nd Assault Support Helicopter Company, the Hercules, with the Americal division, and we had a certain AO. You get to know really, really well. They would say, don't go over there. Why's that? That's the ASHC Valley. Don't go there. We never got ASHC Valley. We never kicked them out, by the way, and the whole time we were in Vietnam. We meaning the U.S.
Right. I don't know if what you just referred to was Lam Son, but give me an overview of Lam Son. ARVNs were on the ground, the combat. You were in air support of their operation, is that correct? And then walk me into Lam Son.
Sure. I'll build up to it. So this was May-ish of 70, April, May, June. And I think another thing to have as a metric is that helicopter pilots, Army helicopter pilots, generally would rotate home with about 1,000 hours, 1,200 hours, something like that. I flew basically, most of us flew about every other day. So about 50% of our year was flying. So June, July, August was fairly routine. Going into December, we have R&R on my horizon. I was going to go to R&R in Sydney. I was looking forward to that. But then our company, not just our company, but 600 or 700 helicopters, I forget all the units, were called as part of the whole Vietnamization, air quotes on that, to hand things over to the Vietnamese and for us to get out of Vietnam, was this last big push to interdict the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And that would take us from Route 9, which is on the South China Sea, through Khe Sanh, which is a whole other story, from 1968, and then all the way to Chapon, which would be kind of a hub of where some of the trails would come together before heading down on the Laotian side to Vietnam and come in the central part and southern part of Vietnam. So we mobilized, and our entire company went up north. So we're in Chu Lai, Da Nang, and then north of that is Quang Tri, and we bivouacked in Quang Tri, along with 6 or 7 other helicopters. And I've actually kind of reviewed some letters I sent back home. My mom kept a bunch of letters, which is really interesting. And I realized that one of the bigger tensions at that time, before February 8th, which is when we actually went into Laos, was just simply, it was crowded airspace. There were helicopters everywhere. You try to refuel, and there's Hueys, there's Chinooks, there's, gunships, we're trying to refuel. And so that kind of led up to the actual Lam Sam 719, 1971, 9, Route 9, going from the South China Sea all the way to Chapon. Before that actually launched on February the 8th. Interestingly, that was my birthday.
That's good. See, I don't have many stories of Lam Son, and most people don't even know about it. Yeah. I have one gentleman who started the Vietnam War Memorial where I live in Colorado, in Fruita, Colorado, Jim Duty. His brother Tom Duty was a helicopter pilot, killed in Lam Son. And but anyways,
that sounds.
And so I did a story on him.
Yeah.
But I don't think a lot of people know about Lam Son, and that's why I'm asking these questions.
Sure.
Because that was, you lost a lot of people. A lot of helicopters were destroyed, damaged. Yeah, in the Newsweek there. And so you said, I think, did you say you lost one pilot in that operation?
One aircraft.
Oh, one aircraft.
Yeah, we were fortunate. I mean, when you look at the list of, so returning to Lam Sam 719, definitely it was an ARVN operation past, here's Vietnam, here's Laos. Once you cross the border, it's all ARVN on the ground. And then Army Aviation supporting them, huge Army, the Chinooks and primarily the Hueys, just enormous. And a lot of destruction because the weather was against us, even though kind of on the seaboard side, South China Sea, it was fairly nice. But when you get into the mountains, it was more heavy laden till 10 or so, and it kind of rises up and down, and you go in the morning and it's just a lot of low-level flying. And unfortunately, with low-level flying, the North Vietnamese had radar-controlled guns, and just a lot of them. And so going down Route 9 with kind of in a valley, essentially, and it's no surprise that we had over 100 destroyed in 45 days and 600 damaged. So one of ours was destroyed. Fortunately, well, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know how many war stories you want to get into, but he, Cook was his name, and he was the aircraft commander, and he forgot that he had his foot transmitting, because you have a foot toggle to transmit radio out. But so they got shot up, and it affects your hydraulic system in his case. And you need hydraulics in order to fly a Chinook. And the reason, and there's a backup system, but both of them were gone. And the reason you need them is because the Chinook with the blades are so heavy, the torque, there's no hope really of manually. So they had a stability augmentation system, they called it, double hydraulics, but they were shot up. So they got shot up and he was in a lifting position. Apparently he must have gotten his load off and then was coming up when he got shot up, and he couldn't not push it forward and thought you're just eventually going to invert like that. So his foot's on the transmit. I heard about it because I wasn't flying that day with the company, but I heard about it later, and he said, "Oh, guys, you know, my hydraulics are gone. Looks like this is it. You know, say goodbye to my mom, blah, blah, blah." You know, real tearful goodbyes, especially if you're hearing it. And then you hear him say, "Let's turn the engines off." So he turns the engines to military standby, which is not off, but they're just reduced RPM, turns them down, and that reduced the lift. And when they came down, just before they hit, he apparently put them back on, and he hit tail first, which was optimum, because everybody else was up near the front. So it completely went up, and they all got out safely, and actually were recovered by the command and control ship. That's always part of what we do.
Rob, what was the most difficult part of your job?
I got to tell you, a lot of it was just a lot of fun. 20-year-olds flying, you know, back then I doubt it was $1 million helicopter. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is. They still fly them today, which is really cool. So it was a lot of fun, generally. Perhaps you've heard the expression, especially for pilots. We were coming back to a hooch, plywood hooch, tin roof, sandbags, exterior for rockets. Had an officers club, music. I even had a tennis racket because there was a tennis court there at Chulai. So that wasn't difficult. It was a lot of fun until, like they also say, hours of boredom punctuated by moments of stark terror, until something happens. And so the difficult part would be to go IFR, but generally we prepared for that. Like if we knew there were clouds and we had to rise up or go down, you kind of get prepared for it. So I'd say flying IFR was difficult. Some of the, mostly the weather was difficult at times, but like I said, most of the time it was just kind of routine stuff until LOMSOM 719. I had actually wanted to extend my tour and become a gunship pilot, but then we went to LOMSOM 719 and I said, let's just get home, you know, when it's time to go. So
a gunship meaning a Cobra?
At that time, it would have been a Cobra. There were a lot of C-model gunships, Hueys, that were outfitted with rockets.
But are you cross-trained in that, or
No.
You would have had to learn?
I would have had to learn.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Any interaction with the Hueys other than rescuing one?
Not really. Rescuing them was kind of what we did. Same thing with gunships. Very little interaction. We did our thing as medium lift helicopter pilot or helicopters, and they did theirs as lift units. Very synchronized combat assaults, hot, cold, LZs, you name it. A lot of difficult flying. So my hat always went off to them, but more so to the grunts, the infantry. As like I said, we'd come back, plywood hooch with metal roof and all that, and I appreciated it even then, that I was coming back to a place where I could lay my head and it was probably going to be dry.
I want to go back for a minute. Tell me about the first time you went to Vietnam, that first day, or did you go over on an airplane, jet?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me just briefly that flight over, and then what you felt, smelled, heard when you first entered Vietnam the first time.
That's I've tried to resurrect some of those memories, and I've read other people's stories as well. And for some, it was just, like, it's a shock, hot, muggy. Well, I'd lived in Louisiana for 4 years before that, before Germany. And maybe I'm just not that thoughtful, but I got off, and it wasn't like, boom. I mean, I'm sure it was, April of 70, but it didn't strike me as some people who had only been raised up in one place. I'd moved to places and countries. I don't know. It didn't shock me. It was hot. It was humid. It was uncomfortable. The smells were really quite different. I could smell the difference between GIs that were on my helicopter versus Vietnamese with their nuc mam and their own body smell, which is different. But that kind of stayed with me for a while.
Tell me about your last day in Vietnam.
I don't remember it that well. Again, I guess I'm not a real good, you have to have an emotional experience on both ends. Other than I told you at the front end, my dad meeting me, which was cool. He came up later to my company up in Chu Lai. Last day was, I really want to tell you before the last day, because we were coming back. So it was Lam Sam 719 essentially ended in March 25th, thereabouts. It didn't really end. War never ended. It never ended. Even when we left, it never ended. But we were gone. But anyway, Lam Sam 719 continued. And then April or so, early April, I came back down to the unit and began to fly with our sister unit called the Boxcars. So they were 178th Assault Support Helicopter Company, the Boxcars. We were the 132nd Assault Support Helicopter Company, the Hercules. But our ships were still up there. Theirs were down here. They needed some pilots. So I was going to be a Peter pilot, right-hand side, to an aircraft commander. And it was early April, and we were just resupplying the AO. We just refueled. I was at the controls. I picked up radar unit, put it up on a hill in our AO, and it was in a little saddle, and there were these big watchtowers, 12 by 12 lumber watchtowers. They didn't want it on the tower, which surprised me, but they didn't want it there. They wanted it in the saddle. They pop smoke. Okay, fine, that's where they want it. It was really just hard to see with all the dust, but we were steady, and I was relying on my crew chief to tell me about the tower, because you can always feel after a while where you are in space. And I could feel, okay, we're close, but I'm all right, to the tower. And so I put the radar set down, and it began to roll. The crew chief says, "Sir, pick it up, it's rolling." Okay. So the guy on the ground could see that it was rolling. They had not set the brakes. Who checks the brakes, right? So the guy on the ground had some 2x4s or 4x4s, and he motioned us to move over just a little. So I was kind of mindful of that tower. I can move over a little bit more. So I began to move over a little bit more. Just as I was setting it down, he was going to put the wood under it. My rear rotor hit the tower. And it went flying that way. And the aircraft commander, in hindsight, I thought he was very thoughtful, because a Chinook has 2 rotor heads, and when this one was gone, this one is going, which means our tail is going to rotate, because it doesn't have a counter rotation. And he took the cyclic, pulled it over, and so our front blade just kind of beat itself to stubs. And we were full of fuel, and I'm thinking, let's get out of here. And we'd landed right on top of our radar set, so we didn't go down the hill. Anyway, so we popped our doors and we got out, and the only reason I bring that up is because that was probably a week before I left. So it wasn't my last day, but it was close enough. I got it called in front of the battalion commander, and he assured me, Mr. Buss, that was a miracle, you weren't killed. And I assured him that I knew that it was a miracle, that I wasn't killed, or we weren't killed. We didn't go and didn't blow up. So that was kind of my last day, more or less.
Okay, I want you to tell me about your dad. You said your dad was in Vietnam while you were serving?
Yes.
And you saw him at one time, or he came to your unit as a chaplain, or just as a friend, or your dad?
Well, came as my dad.
Okay,
So
okay.
the way it worked was when I was in flight school, and my whole company went to Vietnam, but I didn't have to because my dad was already there. I signed a waiver.
Okay.
I thought, he's 47 or 48, whatever he was at that time, and I want to fly. So I signed a waiver, and so he was going to come home. But when I got off the plane and he was there to meet me, and I go, hey, Dad, hey guys, this is my dad. So later, after I was established up at Chu Lai, he did come up to visit my unit. His job as a chaplain was to, of course, go to where the men are. Primarily, there was, I think, one chapel at, I think he was in an engineering unit there. I thought it was Mito, it may have been Canto, but I know it was around Psi Corps and I-4 Corps. But he would go out to the various units, not the field, but like the fire bases. And he had what they call a chaplain's kit, which I now have at home. It's ecumenical, you know, Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, a little cross, if you had a cross, Jewish, you wouldn't, and, you know, Bible, hymn book, and then a communion set, which is
So
perfect.
did he was in World War II,
Yes.
Korea,
Well, he wasn't in the Korean War.
Okay.
He was in Korea.
but how did he get into Vietnam? Did he get called up? He didn't enlist. I mean, he went back in the military? How did that work?
Yeah, he went back in the military.
He just volunteered and said, you need chaplains? I'm a minister?
Oh, no, I don't know about that. I mean, I don't know. He was going to make a career. I have to back up a little bit. He went through seminary, went back in 59, I think, something, 58 or 57, as a chaplain. We went overseas. By the way, Elvis Presley was in Germany when we were there. I think my dad saw him, but anyway, it's a side note.
Who's Elvis Presley? No.
Yeah. Who? Is he still alive? So the fact that he had gone there and then was in Louisiana and Texas, and then Vietnam was ramping up, and then we went to Germany again, and then from Germany he went to Vietnam. But I don't think he volunteered, but I don't know. What I have heard from other readings that I've done is that there was just a need for chaplains, certain quotas for certain ratios, I guess, and he was called up. I don't think he volunteered to go.
Well, I want to mention him in this interview, and
Sure.
you sent me, I think, just one picture of him. If you have anything else, you can email me of him.
Okay.
Either World War II, Vietnam, that would be awesome.
Okay.
Even your brother now. Just briefly, your brother was in the Navy.
Yes.
He's still alive, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah. He's 78, 79.
And was he in combat in Vietnam? No. Okay.
No, he did fly A-7s, the Corsair, and he flew off of aircraft carriers, but he never flew in combat or any combat of any kind, as far as I know.
I'm not familiar with the Prussian army. Tell me what that, and your grandfather was in the Prussian, did I say that right?
That's what they tell me. I've seen the photographs.
I saw a picture of him.
That's the same one I
Is
saw.
that World War I?
I think it was before that.
Okay.
Well, it had to be because they came over in 1898 or something like that. So he was actually in the Kaiser's army, which may have led to World War I, but he wasn't in that.
Okay.
He was 6'4" or thereabouts. And because the Kaiser wanted to have bodyguards, apparently, as the story goes, you're tall, you got a lance, you're going to be with the Kaiser and guard him. So that's what he did. That's what that photograph was.
Have you been to the Vietnam Wall in Washington?
I have been actually by it. I've not gone and looked at 9 of my classmates who are on it.
Do you want to do that someday? You did. I'm surprised you didn't go up to the wall. Was it hard for you emotionally, or just?
No, it wasn't hard for me emotionally. I've had a fairly uneventful tour of duty. like I said, most of the time it was male adventurism because you're 20 years old flying Chinooks. You're not flying lift. Flying lift could have a different take on it. I mean, 2,000 some odd helicopter pilots were dead, 2,000 some odd crew chiefs were killed. If you look at the stats, most of them were Huey or OH-6 pilots. I mean, Marines, don't get me wrong, a lot of people make up that number, but only about 70 were Chinook pilots, just as a
Did you
reference.
say 9 classmates were killed in Vietnam that were in your class?
Yes.
What class? One of your training classes?
6945, 6945. I was
Fort Walters?
Yeah, Fort Walters, Fort Rucker. It would have been the group, I've got pictures and so on, but it would have been the group I graduated with in, must have been Fort Rucker. I'd have to look at it, but I've looked at their names. I've looked at, the Vietnam Pilots, Helicopter Pilot Association, and thanks to them for all the data keeping and so on. As I breezed through that, I realized, wait a minute, 6945A. Wait a minute, there's another one. Before I knew it, I counted 9 that were killed. I didn't know those gentlemen personally, but there's sort of a communication you have. And I remember hearing of a classmate who was radar vectored into a mountain. So it wasn't, not everything was combat related. There's a lot of accidents and weather related. And I heard of another one that took a .50 caliber through his chin, lost his chin. I don't know what he's like today. But yeah, 9 of them. I have seen the models that went around.
By the traveling wall?
Yeah, the traveling wall. I've seen that. And that's
So your last day in Vietnam wasn't emotional? Was it uneventful? You just went home?
pretty much just went home. Was glad to go home. I think I mentioned that LOM-SOM 719 was enough adventure for this boy. And I then went to Fort Rucker. So it was really transfer of duty. It wasn't like, I'm finally out of here. It was a transfer of duty with some leave in between. And I went to Fort Rucker to be an instrument instructor for almost a year. And then they kicked me out because it was a RIF, reduction in force. They just didn't need helicopter pilots. So come February of '72, I was out. And then was going to be on my way to college to the University of Arizona in Tucson to be a civil engineer.
So does Vietnam have a part in your life anymore today? Do you think about it often, or is it just kind of like?
Well, I'm reading now a book on Way, so I've thought about it a lot, and mostly to appreciate the big impact it had on our country and frankly on the world. Someone called Vietnam the poison in the veins of the Army because it was just terrible toward the end. Fragging, we had one fragging in our company while I was there, although he wasn't killed, but the latrine was blown up. So, discipline was not good. Mm-hmm. Aviation units were different than field units. But I've read a lot about it. I didn't read about it a lot. At first, I went right to school at the University of Arizona and was highly involved in engineering classes. But I can remember 1975, because I graduated in '77, they're pushing these Hueys off of, I think it's the USS Kirk or whatever it was, because they're making room for more Hueys to land. And they're going, Rob, you got to see this on TV. And that I do remember, and I use them as, I teach Sunday school.
Oh, good.
And I often use objects as lessons for the students, whether it's, 5th, 6th grade or 1st and 2nd grade. And so it's good to have, kind of the scratch and sniff. Here you can see these things. This is actually a New Testament that my dad gave me when I enlisted. And he's got a signature statement here about his own care for me and desire that I, look to the Lord in those times of loneliness or stress or whatever, and
Awesome.
and He gave me a Bible to be helpful in that, which I sort of used. On the other hand, I probably drank 300 days out of the year, and then was drunk at least 10 of those days and had hangovers. I mean, it was pretty normal stuff for guys in Vietnam, I'm afraid.
That's cool about that, what your dad gave you there. And your dad's no longer with us, right? He's passed away?
He passed away about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, would love to have met him.
Yeah, well, not everybody likes their dad. I have tremendously good feelings about my dad, and my mom's still alive. She's 96.
Uh-huh.
I was going to show you. I think other people have done this too. Maybe, I don't know if we're recording. I can wait.
No, I'm just going to reset this. Yeah.
So high humidity. So the Americal division gave us sort of the wallet that has, made all out of plastic. And along with that, and I've kept this because I just thought it's one of those things you keep. It's, I think it's been called a blood chit or something like that, where all the languages, they're not all, I mean, there's about a dozen or more languages, the major ones, Chinese, Thai, Vietnamese, Cambodian. Basically says, I'm a citizen of the United States of America. I don't speak your language. My government will repay you. Please bring me to somebody who can give me help and all that stuff. But
Wow, you've got a lot of stuff there.
yeah, well, this is one to keep, and I've seen other guys, other veterans, Vietnam veterans, have them as well. I have no idea the efficacy of it. Would it really have worked? Mm-hmm. Who knows? I mean, didn't have to use it, but it's a good keeper.
You mentioned alcohol. I wasn't going to ask you, but
Sure.
Drugs and alcohol in Vietnam. You hear a lot about drugs and alcohol. I've heard they weren't in aviation units. They were just behind the but you guys were. Is that how you would de-stress or just wind down?
Not drugs. I'd probably say I don't recall anybody having marijuana. I would never know about heroin, but lots of drinking. I mean, beer was just, you do a 6-pack a day just about, and then you can, I mean, we're 20 years old, 21, 18, 19, 20, 21, yeah. 22, and a fair amount of stress, but also boredom. Mm-hmm. I mean, for hook pilots, because we weren't having combat assaults, which would be the primary mission of a lift unit. Mobility, I mean, that's what the mobility part is. But I have a feeling they had their problems too. Well, I know they did. I mean, I've read enough to know. Yeah. Partly because loss of purpose. If you have no purpose, it's almost like life. But if you have no purpose, you want to fill it with something or dull that ache. So, yeah.
So when you came home in '71, though, I mean, you weren't met with the anti-war people, the protesters, and the hippies spitting on you. I mean, a lot of veterans, that really was a big deal.
No, and maybe it was the manner in which we returned. Maybe they changed it some. I don't, again, I don't know why my memory isn't crystal clear on my coming back. What was crystal clear is that my brother met me. Mm. He was in the Navy still, and he was at, I think it was at Miramar in California, and I came down to stay with him, he and his wife. He met me with a 6-pack of Coors beer from the, I guess it was Miramar, must have been where I got off. And by the time I reached his house, I had drunk it all.
I don't see you, I just don't see you like that. I don't know why. You just seem like you're a real clean-cut guy, and so.
God, but God. That's what everybody who could ever tell you the way they were and where they are. But that's where I was at. And fortunately, early enough in my life, God did lay hold of me. March of '72, when I got out, I went to be with my sister prior to going to the University of Arizona, because I'd already signed up in the School of Engineering, College of Engineering. Why the College of Engineering, you may ask? It's because I wanted to fly. I still wanted to fly. I ended up with like 1,500 hours. It was good, but I wanted to fly. And if you're going to fly for the Air Force, because the Army already got rid of a bunch of us, then you had to have a college degree. So I thought, well, maybe I could be, I could understand more why I could fly, go into aeronautical engineering. So I signed up for engineering. But I got out, was with my sister in Florida, waiting to go to Tucson. And I went to their church and went there every time she went. And before you knew it, once again, God was saying, Rob, who's going to be first in your life? I told you I was raised in a Christian home. Maybe I didn't say Christian, but my dad was a chaplain. But I had never yielded myself to Jesus Christ. And so in March of '72, at this church, at one gathering, and it had nothing to do with people, it was you and me, Lord. I became a Christian. I was born again. Right. And I got to thinking about the major I had in the College of Engineering. I began to think, well, that was just sort of something I did. I wonder what, I read through them, chemical, mechanical, electrical, structural, civil, and that sort of went, wow, it meets the needs of people, very practical way and all that stuff. So I shifted, I was still in the College of Engineering, but I shifted to civil engineering. So that was kind of the outcome of leaving, and going first from Vietnam to the United States, not being met by unfriendly people at all. I learned that kind of later. Everybody has their little spot in a big mosaic, and begin to understand, no internet, remember? No, very little TV, no cell phones, all that. Everything is sort of in bits and pieces. You talk to people. I never even knew that we were treated poorly coming back. But there was no celebration either. Yeah. It was just my brother and his wife. Welcome home, Rob. Yeah, I'm glad to be back, man. Whew. Had a little banner, and, okay, I'm done, but I'm going to go to Fort Rucker and we're going to finish this out. And, wasn't going to make a career of it then. Wasn't going to make a career of it at all, as it turned out.
Are you proud to be a Vietnam veteran?
I'm happy. I don't know about proud. I don't say that to say you should be more humble. I'm not, I don't hide it. In fact, I wear a hat now. I try to meet other guys, and I've met quite a few, and we've connected on different levels. In fact, one fellow I met, his birthday is in 2 days, and I'm going to say hello. I just think it was bad what we did. The bombing, Agent Orange, it was terrible. There you go. I mean, the domino effect and all that stuff, I don't know. Yeah. But I do know that we left a bad mark on the country. Admittedly, it takes two to tango, so it's not like, well, if they hadn't come down and invaded us, we wouldn't have been fighting you. Well, that's true, and so on and so forth. I've read so much since getting out, and it just seems like there was a lot going on that people knew it wasn't going to work, but we did it anyway. I just think, now there's a lot of cleanup, so to speak, almost like the Ukraine.
What have we learned from Vietnam?
The country or me?
Yeah, the country.
I have
history, whatever.
I have no idea what we've learned. I really don't, Larry, because that would almost be getting into everybody's mind. And maybe we've learned to make it all volunteer, for one thing. Maybe we've learned to be more transparent. I don't know. People criticize the way we left Afghanistan. Frankly, I thought we were in Afghanistan 10 years too long. I think we should have gotten out there a lot earlier. So did we learn that we should have gotten out earlier? I don't know. But then I don't know all the other aspects of what led to our, being there and staying there. So I really don't know what we learned, except maybe a volunteer army was really the way to go.
As a veteran, as a citizen of the United States, Rob, what does the American flag mean or represent to you?
I love the fact that it means I can speak without censure generally. And then as a Christian, more importantly, I can worship without fearing, like we're at 35th and Peoria, where our church is, that we're going to be shut down. So those are two things that are important to me as an American.
Right.
And people are coming to America because we still represent those things. We have a lot of foreign engineers, I'd say not foreign, but anyway, not born in America, from India or China. We have a big company. And I've asked them in our Toastmaster class, I said, so what do you like about America? What is it? And it is freedom in the sense that you're freer to make choices, and you can speak with a fair amount of latitude. I mean, you can't slander or libel, but there's a lot of freedom there.
Mm-hmm. Well, the word freedom, that was my next question. What does freedom mean to you? And tell me about the price for freedom.
Well, freedom in America, and for me, means I have the ability to make choices without too many constraints or too many restraints. Do I pay taxes? You bet. Is that freedom? No, I have to do that. So it's not freedom. I've got to do that. Is that bad? No, it's not bad. That's life. That's life as Ecclesiastes would say, under the sun. It's just the way life is. I greatly appreciate being in America, being an American. So freedom to me does embody being able to speak, like I said, and being able to worship. I can tell other people about Christ. I've just told you a little bit about my journey, about Jesus, and I haven't been hauled into jail because there are countries that won't let you say anything. So that's very helpful. We have an economy that it would be great if there was more leveling of the riches. You always strive to have a bigger middle class.
Well, that's why your father's story as a believer is so interesting to me, because I have a few chaplain stories, Catholic priests, and I'm just really after the spiritual side of combat too. So that's why your dad's story is interesting. And last rites to a dying Marine on Iwo Jima, you know, how do they die on the battlefield, from corpsmen I've interviewed over the years, and medics. And so there's a spiritual side of combat.
Well, we are body, soul, and spirit. There's always that aspect to every human. Yeah. My dad was not a combat chaplain. There are some few that were combat chaplains. They would go with the units into the bush. They would hang out with them, suffer with them, be there with them. Sometimes there's conflict with chaplains and the commanders because there's sort of a different, do you report something that these guys did that was violent and inhumane and it could be a war crime? Or do you not do that as a chaplain? There's a lot of tension. My dad, having been in World War II, at some point through that, decided later, like about 10 years later, to become a chaplain. And he talked to my mom and said, you know, I'm thinking of being a chaplain. What do you think? And she was fine. They made a great couple, very great couple.
Yeah. Is your mom still alive?
She is. She's 96.
Good.
She's losing her ability to think clearly, but she's still there.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
At the end of my interviews, I'm not sure if you've seen my work, but at the end of my documentaries, but at the end, I ask the veterans to look into the camera and just to give us a look.
Oh, sure.
Can I ask you to do that?
Yeah. You bet.
If you want to say something, if not, just into the camera, Rob.
Okay.
Show me what you got.
All righty. So this is the old boonie hat that.
Does it still fit?
Well, it does, I think, more or less.
In other words, try it on, dude.
Try it on. There you go.
That looks good.
Yep.
Okay.
I was a wobbly one, warrant officer one, when I got this, and Chu Lai is where I was, Vietnam.
Okay.
And then, as I mentioned before, the Americal division gave us these plastic wallets, and in that, I've got military
Money.
money.
Is it still good? What's the exchange rate on that now?
Yeah, not now. And I've also got some Vietnamese money, and then of course the young me.
Oh, look at that. You never sent me that picture. You're gonna have to scan that, or however you sent me the
I could do it.
Can you scan it and send it? You
Sure,
got it?
sure.
That's a good one. I love that picture.
Then I've got what they gave us was code of conduct.
Okay.
And the reason this is important is particularly as if you're a prisoner of war, to keep the code of conduct was one way to keep faith with your fellows.
Okay.
And then the other was Psalm 23 that they gave us.
Oh, right. The Lord is my
The
shepherd.
Lord is my shepherd. Again, body, soul, and spirit,
Right.
even if you're in the military. In fact, a friend of mine was in the Marines in '67 up around Da Nang. And he had talked about, he was going to get baptized before he left. And for some reason, the particular person wouldn't do it because he wasn't a member of their church. So when he went over to Vietnam, the chaplain there baptized him.
Okay.
It could have meant something. Hopefully it did. But this one, I'll show you, is
Yeah, that's good.
I guess it's called the blood chit. Anyway, I've already explained that, but
Explain it one more time.
okay.
So I can see it in the camera better.
Alrighty, so this is a material made out of silk, so it's pretty durable. It's not going to get rotted away. In about 14 or 16 languages, Chinese, Vietnamese, Cambodian, Laotian, bunch of languages, English here at the top, which basically says that I'm a citizen of the United States, I'm in need of your help. Basically, if you help me, my government will reward you. I never had to use it, but it is a nice thing to have if you don't speak. By the way, it translates really well because we had a Vietnamese electrical engineer in my company, and I asked her, I said, so does this really say that? And she says, yep, that's what it really says. Awesome. One of the other things, I already showed you about the Bible that my dad gave.
Hold that up again, open it up.
Good News for Modern Man is the one he chose to give me the translation. It's good. And then his inscription at the beginning, essentially saying to his son, who he knew was enlisting in the Army, that this would be a comfort to you. It's easy to read, and when you're lonely. And his favorite verse is Romans 8:28, for God causes all things to work together for good to those that love him and are called according to his purpose. And this last thing, well, not last, but it's certainly not the least,
That looks pretty authentic.
is a rubberized map of the Southeast Asia.
Okay.
And what I've circled would be essentially places that that I was either going to or was involved in. And this is the South China Sea here. This is Chu Lai, where I was at. And this is probably Da Nang, where we went. Anyway, it's
That's a rubber.
you could use it to keep rain off of you if you needed to, if you were down.
Did you use those to know where you were going in Vietnam?
Not really. We mostly flew VFR, which was Visual Flight Rules.
Right.
And so we went by landmarks, bearings. I mean, we kind of knew where we were by the time we got to be aircraft commander. And let's see, what else? I would say just there's my flight class, graduating flight class.
6945.
Yep.
And somewhere in there are those 9 gentlemen that aren't with us anymore.
Oh, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I'd love to. Can you scan that too? Do you know how to scan? How did you send me the other pictures? You scanned them, right?
I think I took a picture of them, maybe. I don't know.
Let's shake your hand on camera. Thank you for your service. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming and letting me tell your story, and I will be a good steward of your story.
I'm looking forward to it.
And I say, God bless you, your family, and hopefully we'll be able to pull a lot of people from the fire, and we'll take them to heaven with us.
That sounds great.
Okay,
That's
man.
the way to go.
God bless you, Rob.
Thank you, Larry.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the time.